We have an incredibly special guest on the podcast today, a former professor, a historian, an author, and one of the greatest intellectual minds in the modern Republican movement, Larry Schweikart. Larry, thank you so much for coming onto the show today. I like to say that Republicans often have the stronger policy, but their messaging and implementation is so subpar that they lose in elections. And I think that also has to do with not only the policy, but who's delivering that message, right? As I said, and I think that Trump's personality, while was rough around the edges for sure, he was vibrant, dynamic, he was loud, he was willing to fight, and a lot of people resonated with that. It is why he won as many votes as he did and expanded his base from 2016 as much as he did. And it's also why many on the left that have a very strong personality are able to push as one unit cohesively and take over many of the institutions of modern America. I mean, you must know yourself as a former professor that the institution of education, for instance, is highly manipulated by the left. It is occurring in many institutions, public and private, across this country. And Democrats are simply better at being unwilling to give in. And Republicans have been willing to do that for a long time. And Trump has changed that and said, no, we've had enough of this. We need to change our ways.
Well, right. And so one of the things about this notion of fighting back is it says to everybody that you actually believe in the policies that you're putting forward. And when you're constantly willing to compromise, and yes, every once in a while compromise is required, but when you are all too willing to compromise, it tells the other guy, you don't really believe in the very policies that you're pushing forward, which is what we just talked about in a lot of this. So there is this element about Trump as a person that will be incredibly difficult to replicate or to copy, even from people who share his policy views. And you see it, for example, if anything happens in the political world, Trump comes out with a tweet laying out very clearly what, in most cases, the conservative position is. Democrats will almost all of them line up on the other side and start attacking. Our side will come out with, well, you know, this isn't the right tone, or maybe we should back off, or maybe they have a point on this, as opposed to, you know, fighting this onslaught of the other side with tepidness.
Yes, absolutely. The capitulation by many on the right is an issue because the left moves further left, and the right's response by many milquetoast Republicans is to say, well, you know, we could probably give in here or there, but we can hold on to, you know, the core value of what we're trying to push. And the problem with that is eventually the core begins to erode, which it already has, and you get to a point where your own policies aren't even identifiable anymore. And you see that with the Trump movement as Trump pushed back and said, no, we're going to be conservative in many ways, and we're going to have common sense conservatism. And just being common sense conservative upset a lot of milquetoast Republicans who believed that they needed to move to the center to capitulate to those on the left. And what also happened is that these Republicans thought they could win votes by capitulating. What they didn't realize is that Democratic voters, an overwhelming, probably over 95% of the time, do not care whether or not the right is moving and giving in or giving sort of any concessions. They're still going to vote to the left. So then you lose the right and the left. And that is why you see a John McCain lose Indiana. You see Mitt Romney get blown out by Barack Obama when Barack Obama was a very defeatable candidate in 2012. But you do see, however, Trump winning 74 million votes in 2020.
Well, or you see Martha McSally managed to lose not one, but two elections.
Yes.
in Arizona, one against a very weak candidate. So it's, you know, when you talk about the fundamental policies, I don't think in terms of pro-life. I don't think in terms of free trade. I think in terms of the Constitution is a fundamental policy, and personal liberty is a fundamental policy. And then starting from those two bases, you would have a difficult time conceding much of anything to the left, because, you know, just look at what they're doing today with the lockdowns. And yes, there's a couple of Republican governors like my own here, Ducey and Dewaney up in Ohio, and Kemp, for a while that adhered to these kind of lockdown policies, they're fundamental violations of constitutional rights that should have been attacked early on, certainly by the state legislatures. And this gets me into one of my hobby horses, which is the problem we're having right now with the state legislatures not doing their duty to decertify or in certifying in the first place back in December. This all started with the lockdowns. And when these state legislatures did not do their duty and override the governors and say, no, we're not going to do this. This is a violation of the First and the Fifth Amendments, and we're just not going to do it. They lost their authority to do anything right there.
Absolutely. I think that the point you're making about the Constitution is so critical because the Republican Party in and of itself was formed, right, in many ways to just more strictly adhere to the Constitution. And that is what Republicans have supposedly run on for a majority of their existence. And it's turned into an individual policy campaign, right? Are you pro-life? Are you yada, yada? Instead of just saying, right, we simply believe that the Constitution should be the foundation for all legislative and policy-making decisions moving forward. And that will resolve nearly any conflict you have by returning back to the Constitution. Obviously, not everything's written in it, but it provides a pretty strong groundwork. And I think what's ended up happening is the establishment that wants to make money and wants to push certain issues that make them money will change the dialogue so that people are dragged away from those constitutional roots that made the Republican Party so strong in the first place.